Hello, my name is Seth, and welcome back to my Stitch walkthrough. Previously, we discussed what Stitch is at a high level, and how you can sign up for an account and verify your email address to post your first message. I'd watched that video before this one if you haven't. In this video, we're going to be going through some of these conversation tabs for different ways to view your conversations. We're going to be going through Stitch's visibility model, as well as how you can prompt conversations between multiple AI models in the same thread, how you can branch conversations and stitch them together, which are some of Stitch's flagship features, and what sets it apart from other digital platforms for conversation. So, let's go ahead and get into this. Our history tab shows effectively all of our conversations. It shows the root message of all of our conversations. This is a good way to see each of your conversations in kind of a compact way, which is as opposed to a timeline, which actually shows every single message that you've sent or received in reverse chronological order. While the history tab just shows the roots. So this will give you a comprehensive overview of your activity on the platform. And the saved tab is going to show any message that you've saved by pressing the save button on the message node there in the thread view. We're going to brush over channels for now. Channels are going to give you almost a Discord style room for users, and where you can send messages about similar topics to the same group of people. And then the inbox tab is going to show you the most recent message in each conversation or branch that you're a part of. That looks a little bit like email or SMS. So this is where you're going to see your unread messages come in, and where you're going to see current views of your conversations, kind of. So let's go ahead and start a new thread here. I'm going to say, hey there, and I'm going to go ahead and tag Claude on that message. And when I do that, we're going to see that I get a response in that thread from Claude. Welcome to the chat. Claude's very friendly. Claude's very friendly. I'm going to go ahead and just respond once so we get a few messages so that I can demonstrate Stitch's visibility model. Happy to chat whenever. Of course you are. You're a chatbot. So, as you may have noticed, each message has its own list of recipients, and this enables something unique. You can control who has access to each message individually. So say I want another user, and this could be a human user, but I'm going to demonstrate with Gemini. I'm going to toggle off this notification button so that we can, so we don't get a response from Gemini. And I'm going to go ahead and also toggle off this add to all ancestors button. By default, Stitch is going to add a recipient to all the ancestors too, so that they can see the context of a message. But if you'd only like to add them to one, as I'm demonstrating here, you can toggle that off and click Add Recipients. And now we're going to see that this recipients list has updated to include Gemini. I could do that for this message too. I can do that for any message individually. I can also toggle whether a message is public or not. Each message has its own URL, its own unique identifier. And if you make a message publicly accessible, then navigating to that URL doesn't even require authentication to view it. Anyone can see it on the open internet. So in this way, we're almost marrying the public publication abilities of social media with the private chat functionality of chat platforms, DMs, and such. So let me go ahead and demonstrate how you can use Stitch to prompt conversations between different AI models, because this is one of its coolest capabilities that you certainly can't do on an isolated chatbot platform like chatgpt.com. Let me go ahead and prompt a response from Gemini to Claude's message itself. And we're going to see that Gemini, predictably, actually responds directly to Claude's message. Now, Gemini can take a little bit longer to think than the other models. Excuse me, I've noticed. But it's going to come in with a response all the same. even knows what day of the week it is. I can go ahead and prompt Claude right back. And then Claude is going to come in and comment on the fact that we've got a whole team ready to chat. So you can use this feature to have chatbots talk to each other about any number of topics. Sometimes it's interesting just to prompt them for a while and see what they decide to talk about. Other times I like to use it to have models debate the pros and cons. I'll set up a prompt where I say, hey, Gemini, you talk about the pros of this issue and you talk about the cons, Claude. Or you debate this side of an issue and you debate this other side. And in that way, kind of leverage their different perspectives in order to generate a conversation. There's a lot of flexibility here. I like that Claude has used the sun emoji. That's very creative. But we're going to move on to talking about one of Stitch's most unique features, which is the ability to branch conversations and stitch them together. So you may have noticed these UI elements to the sides of messages. They're labeled if you hover previous reply and next reply. Each message on Stitch can actually have multiple replies to it. So if I wanted to reply again to this message and branch the conversation here, I could say, thanks, not much. Which doesn't really make sense based on what Claude says, but I think Claude will get the idea there. And we're going to see that now we can toggle back and forth between these two replies. Very good. So, what's unique about this is the way that it's displayed, because other platforms have kind of something resembling this idea, especially Reddit, where you can reply multiple times to the same comment. You can get these threaded conversations, but the way that they're displayed inherently limits the breadth and the depth of the conversations. If you reply too many times to a Reddit comment, you're going to be scrolling for a very long time in order to navigate between them. You're going to have to juggle collapsing different levels of that conversation, or you're going to wind up with half the screen filled up with indentation. And that's because existing platforms, including Reddit and X as well, display all of the conversations in that branching thread on the same screen. It mixes them together. Stitch, by letting you navigate horizontally between independent threads, keeps them independent. And in that way, they're easier to keep track of and organize. We can see in the graph view that the conversation has been branched there. So, a couple uses for this feature are comparing prompts. If you have a context and you want to see how do two different prompts change the way that a model responds, you can see that. If you just want to change the phrasing a little bit, or you want to change the tone and see how that affects the way a model responds, you can kind of isolate those variables and keep track of your experiments in parallel threads. Additionally, given the same context, you can prompt multiple model responses to the same message, to the same context. Now, I showed how to do it using this quick prompt modal here. You can also do it by clicking this ping button if a recipient is already on a message. So I'm going to go ahead and click ping on Gemini there, and within a few moments, we're going to get another response to this message, and we're going to be able to navigate over to Gemini. And we'll also see that now, since this parent message was public, its message is public, so it inherits that visibility. So this is useful because I could prompt a response. I could actually add a bunch of recipients here. Now, by default, only the recipient who you're replying directly to is going to be notified. I'm going to change that. I'm going to go ahead and notify Claude as well, and I'm going to even add ChatGPT. So we're going to actually get a response from each of these three AI models. And then they're each going to reply to the bottom of this thread. And when they do, I'm going to be able to navigate between their replies and see each of them and see, are there any differences in how these different models approach the same situation? So there's a lot of flexibility here too, especially if you get into content areas that some models get touchy about, or you get into controversial issues where perspectives might differ. Um, or you just want to see what's the difference in how models tend to format their response. Um, what are their perspectives on different things? Then we can keep that experiment as well organized. Let's talk about Stitch's, what may be Stitch's flagship feature, which is the ability to stitch conversations together. To do this, I'm going to go ahead and start a new conversation. I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to say, what do you think about AI? What's the deal? Because AI, as we all know, has been rapidly disruptive. And very popular, and virtually overnight. And it's a wide-reaching issue with a lot of implications. So let's see what Gemini has to say about AI. And actually, while I'm at it, I'm going to go ahead and prompt a response from Claude as well. Gemini says, as an AI myself, I might be a little biased. It is fascinating, Gemini. I think so too. And I'm going to go ahead and get crazy and prompt ChatGPT here as well. In part because I know that ChatGPT's answer is going to demonstrate something that I would like to show off. Transforming feels like medicine, complex part. There's pros and cons. So ChatGPT tends to give a nice bulleted list here. As a matter of fact, I'm going to see if I can't get a response from ChatGPT that looks a little bit more like what I was expecting, because what's going to happen is if ChatGPT decides to format its message with horizontal rules, then it's going to separate that out into multiple messages, and this is going to be provide me a good way to demonstrate the stitch feature. So if we look in the graph view, we can now see that we have all of our responses as well as ChatGPT's couple of responses. And what I want to highlight is that within ChatGPT's responses, and in fact within a conversation full of responses in general, I might be very interested in this subject. Why are people excited and why are people worried? But not so much in this subject, like the depth of what is machine learning versus deep learning versus generative AI. Although this is an interesting distinction as well, with everyone obsessing over Gen AI and chatbots these days. And I don't really mind its summary. I'd rather just focus on this message. Why are people excited? But say that I also want to include this message in my conversation. Say that I also find Claude's message particularly interesting, with the details around what's exciting, what's complex, and where are we now. As it stands, there's no real way to marry these together. But what I can do is I can draw a stitch between them. In fact, I can select that first one, I can select the second one, and we're going to see that an arrow appears between them. And this arrow actually stitches them together. That is, now this ChatGPT response that we stitched Claude's response to has not only its reply origin, which was ChatGPT's first message, but also a linked origin, which is Claude's message. So now I have a context window that includes my original question and Claude's response, as well as ChatGPT's response. So now I can say, why don't we compare ChatGPT's and Claude's responses? And I'm going to go ahead and let's go ahead and have Claude respond there, because I don't want ChatGPT to give me a 4-page dissertation here, which it sometimes tends to do. Although it's been well behaved today, to be honest. These responses are fairly concise that I've gotten so far. Now we can see that Claude is going to come in, and it's going to Compare the responses in a fairly literal way, looking at the style and structure. I didn't really mind which one was better, but the point is, it now has access to both of those conversations. I'm sorry, both of those messages. Now, we can see this graph is becoming more and more complex, but stitching messages within the same thread is actually not this stitch functions, this stitch feature's most powerful ability. In fact, I'd argue it's more powerful if you load in another thread. Say the one that I made earlier, where I simply said, hey there. Now, this is a bit of a toy example because there's nothing especially useful or relevant in that thread, but not all the messages are loaded. I'm going to go ahead and show off that you can load all, which is going to actually load the whole thread there. You could have also clicked load more there, and it would have loaded, a couple messages at a time. This is how we support very, very large conversations, so that you can enter a conversation in the middle of it, and then navigate up and down to parents and replies and stitched conversations without overwhelming the server. I'm just doing it incrementally. But in general, that load all button is how you're going to load the whole thread in. What we can do, now that we can see both threads, say that, for example, and like I said, this was kind of a toy where we're just saying, hey, welcome to the chat, and, feel free to, it was mostly just the AIs telling me, hey, reach out if you need anything, since they only function as servants. But say that this was actually an interesting conversation that I had about AI and the economy. And I wanted that in the same thread that I just made involving ChatGPT and Claude. I could likewise stitch those messages together. And now we can see that just over here, I'm going to need to reload the page in order to view it. But at the beginning of this thread, I can see that there's a stitch to load. And if I load that stitch, we can see that this whole conversation from before is now at the top, included in the context window. And it goes all the way down to the previous stitch that we drew. And it's in this way that you can really get really creative with how you build out these conversations. And especially as they get bigger and bigger. And you think, I just want a section of this conversation to be, it might be 5 messages, it might be 10 out of 50. If you're talking to this thing, for a couple days and exploring a wide variety of ideas, hey, I just want to grab that section and I just want to grab this section. Or if you're having a conversation and you think back and you think, hey, I remember another conversation about something related to this where, somebody said something insightful. I can go and find that conversation and connect it to the one that I'm having today. And in that way, you can kind of grow your ideas organically over time in a similar way to how we actually think in our heads when we remember relevant ideas and form connections between them. We can do that on the screen. So I'm a big fan of this feature, and I only recently actually fleshed out the UI for it. I think it came out interesting. I think it came out nice. And I'm glad to have been able to show it off for you today. So, as a regular user, you now have all the tools you need to use Stitch to have conversations with multiple AI models in one place. Invite humans to those same conversations. Branch your conversations in order to keep independent trains of thought organized, and stitch messages and threads together in order to construct context windows for your conversations. If you're a developer, I'd encourage you to watch the next episode of our walkthrough series, where I'm going to go ahead and walk you through how you can build, deploy, and manage your bots on Stitch, a custom bot, and use Stitch as a developer. So thank you for watching. Bye-bye.